read to me, do you know what it did to me? It
No.
kind of like put me in a state of shock.
Really?
Because then I realized that all of my forebears, generations of leaders before me, had up to that, from the time that he wrote that, that's 1962, isn't it? You look at the page and you see when that was written.
Give me 1 second. This policy letter came from 65 and revised for 83.
Yeah, everything that was revised in 83, if you want to go in the weeds on that, that simply was the big review that was being done uh, for the project to sort of clean up and update anything that was done. There was projects that were done at that time to do all of that. That was being done by the compilations branch sub people, and you can possibly get the details on that 1983 review, which was done on thousands and thousands of Hubbard's writings by talking to Russ Williams someday. Anyways, okay, so that's neither here nor there. The original date is 1965, so uh, that's just important to realize that from 65 to the end of the movement, there was a lack of maturity. I don't think one of the points I was trying to make to you, which it just goes in and out of everybody's ears who are like expert level of Scientology, is the fact that, like I told you, there's not enough Karen de la Cares
Yeah.
in the top of the movement, and there's not even enough people. The people that have this sort of like autistic, almost eidetic memory characteristics should have been allowed to be the people that worked, like sort of like as the subordinates to the top council members, which was what my job, which was what I wish to be. I wish to be like sort of a subordinate person within the think tank to be able to sort of like quickly get the answers to main the main think tank boss, so that they would make correct decisions. But there's not a single. I think I told you, like the whole megalomaniac setup of Scientology is such that no one's allowed to be internally that degree of overview expert to even have the authority to be a blue penciler person.
Yeah.
Nobody is allowed to be a blue pencil. Yet he's given the authorization right there. That is the loophole. That is the theoretical loophole that nobody has risen up to the level of understanding of everything that Hubbard wrote to then go, okay, we need to blue pencil this. We need to blue pencil that. There were people that were of that level of responsibility, but they're the older generation Apollo era Commodore staff aides. And then depending on the actual individual staff aide that existed in the whole history, from the point where Hellerich said, okay, I want to have Commodore staff aides. And then he wanted to say, okay, yeah, the staff aides we got to get rid of, because you can't have called Commodore staff anymore, because that was a problem with the IRS, because the IRS said, listen, buddy, you're calling all the top leaders Commodore staff, and you're the Commodore. What the fuck? We can't give you tax exempts.
Yeah.
You can't even have the Ulrich Personal Office. The Ulrich Personal Office had to be pulled out of the Sea Org and made into the for-profit Author Services.
Oh
That was the
shit.
only way. And then you can't have the Author Services running the church. So they had to hide that, and that's where Mark Fisher comes in. He was the key go-between guy to hide the control between Hubbard and the rest of the movement, but it's right in the Author Services advices. And you're talking to the guy who read the Author Services advices like this, like a course supervisor does, which is wait, stop every sentence, stop every word, stop every phrase, and really understand what he's talking about there, because you don't want to miss what the hell he's talking about, because they're going to do what he says. But then, like Jesse Prince says, and like Miscavige complains, we can't keep following Hubbard. He's fucking things up. He's making us trip over our own things. We'll never get tax exemption until he's dead and out of the way, because he's still trying to run everything. So, yeah, there was always those kind of problems. But anyways, but Miscavige, neither any of the members of the exectorate, neither any of the Watchdog Committee members, with a few exceptions, would want to blue pencil something out. Another, Class 8. No. Oh, gosh. There's one key policy in the Class 8, which is another in the top 20 policies of the Class 8 course. The Class A Scientologists got drummed into their heads to be a similar principle to the one you just read. The Blue Pencil principle is also in one of the Class 8 lectures. If you ever listened to the Class 8 lectures, that's the one where the Xenu story that the South Park excerpted came from.
Do you know, like...
11. It's the one, it's called Assists. It's the if you saw the South Park episode,
Yeah.
you know where it says, this is what the Scientologists actually believe. That's a verbatim transcript of Class 8 lecture number 11, I think it is, which is called Assists.
Well, I have one from the 17th ACC, and I have one from the 6th ACC, lecture 88.
Okay, I don't want to get you. I don't want to pile up more things which are lower than like priority 25. Okay, so you don't need to know this. You don't need to get in. We don't need to get in those weeds, and I shouldn't. I'll have to reframe the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is Scientology did not develop people within the top management ranks who could carry out their responsibilities. And the Blue Pencil level of responsibility is something that just flies completely over the heads of anyone there, including Miscavige, including anyone in this whole last era of Miscavige. You have to understand what Pat Broker, his viewpoint, he's an Apollo veteran. He understands the Commodore staff aides. He's lived through those years of Commodore staff aides level of responsibility. Mm-hmm. Pat Broker didn't even live through the level of responsibility of this 1965 writing that you're reading, but me, because I'm like this, when I was on the project that I had to read everything, I came across that one kind of like is stuck in my mind till we get to round to the point of asking, what are the key most long-range issues regarding Scientology? This is such a major loophole, nobody even appreciates it. But this is the kind of leadership level that somebody should have had, and it likely is always brushed aside. And I'm probably the only ex-Scientology theoretical person who brings it up. Nobody else will bring up the Blue Pencil policy. In fact, it was a key policy in my submissions, but I know that it went over the head of, and I had to send my submissions to Mariette Lindstein when she was the top editor. All of my submissions on the routing forms had to go, and all my paperwork, like I said, 150 some submissions, all went to Mariette for approval. And Mariette's predecessor was a man named Bob Browning. Bob, this was so complicated to him, he would ask me to come into his office and sit down with him and then go over line by line the submissions, the LRH references, line by line. Just sitting there, like right now, if I were to go to sit there with you in the room, we'd pull out the green volumes, we'd pull out the page, I'd pull out the paragraph, I'd say, this is why I wrote what I wrote in my routing form submission, because LRH said this here, and then the principle, and if you read that sentence again just before the Blue Pencil, if you read that again very carefully and slowly, I'll point out something.
Oh, sorry, hang on. All right, so the same sentence, you said?
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
When re-releasing an old policy letter, always blue pencil out everything gone old and contradicted by later policy letters.
Anything that a later policy letter which contradicts an earlier policy letter has to be done. This principle is still applied. This is still a responsibility of RTC. Like when they came out in the late 90s with the drilling. They came out with the drilling binders. Have you heard of the drilling binders? They're the ones that are used in the classrooms today with the drill simulator. Have you ever seen the drill simulator and know what the drill simulator is?
No, I know like the book of E-meter drills, but...
Okay, so some of these recent defectors from Scientology, are you familiar with the guy who was recently interviewed, very briefly, and it was a Tony Ortega article or one of the interviews with either Chris or with Aaron, and he was at Flag doing training, what they do in the classroom when you do your drilling to become proficient as an auditor, you use what's called a drills simulator, which is an electronic machine, which you plug into the e-meter, and then when you're doing your drilling, it's always a two-person thing. There's the trainee auditor, and then there's the coach. The coach is using the drill simulator, and he punches buttons on the drill simulator, which is like a big keyboard, and then the keyboard has all the different reads that are supposed to be pressed by the coach, and the coach has a little stand which holds the upright binder so that he can just turn the pages on the binder, and the coach is reading the steps in the pack. There's the drill pack. The drill packs are kept on a large shelf on one wall of all of the training rooms where they do the classrooms in the classroom setup at Clearwater in that big superpower building. There's a couple floors which have all the trainees. There's what's called a theory training where you just sit down and read the packs, and then there's the practical area where you go over and you sit down with the coach, and you got your drill simulators, you got the drills binders you pull the drills binders that you're going to use for your drill off the shelf, sit down with your coach, and he plugs in, you bring your e-meter over there and you plug it into the drill simulator, which are all kept there, and you plug them together, and then the coach reads the drill binder, like a 3-ring binder, and he turns the pages. There are all these plastic coated pages, and they're very nicely printed, so he can just follow along what he's supposed to say. It tells him what he's supposed to say as the coach, tells him what buttons he's supposed to push on the drill simulator. That sends a signal over to the e-meter, and then the trainee auditor is sitting, with the e-meter in front of him, and then in front of his e-meter on the other side is a doll. So they always have this little doll sitting there, and that's the fake, quack recipient. That's how you train the auditor. You train them sitting down in the practical classroom, and it's done with a coach who's using the drill simulators and the drill binders, and there are literally thousands of these drill binders for every single variation of all the sub-quackery techniques, and that's how you train an auditor there. It takes literally 6 months of training intense, like you're talking 10-hour days to get a person up to being a class 4 auditor so they can do all of the key stuff. In order to get up to I had you do CS 53 yesterday and the green form 40.
Mm-hmm.
To get up to that level, you probably go through easily 100 to 200 drills, binders of drills, maybe more, 250 to 300 drills, binders of drilling, and with a coach to get up all the sub-little auditing procedures. And that's why becoming an auditor is so lengthy, so hard, that to become a Karen de la Care is almost impossible. You're talking like 4 or 5 years. Scientology says training is so fast. That's so bullshit. To become a class 12 is going to take you 5 to 10 years. These people that are Scientology highest trained auditors, and they're working 10 hours a day to just do the training. It's impossible. It's impossible to make enough of the class. So to get back to my point of why there's no Scientologists that are capable of being blue penciler quality level understanders of all things Hubbard, it takes years to become the top technical quackery people to even be able to judge whether it's correct to blue pencil out this or that or the other thing. You have to be this meticulous rememberer of every single writing of Hubbard's. And then the good thing is, how I always ask you, what's the date? Because I'm my Bible principle is the one you just read. Later references, what does it say in that little line again?
It says, when re-releasing an old policy letter, always blue pencil out everything gone old and contradicted by later policy letters.
Anything contradicted by later policy letters. This is a principle that applies to the technical writings, the blue writings. This principle applies to virtually all of Hubbard's writings. One of the key most writings of Hubbard I put on your list is the one called Seniority of Orders.
Yep.
You saw that, right?
Yep, I already put it in the folder of recommendations.
I know. And remember the word emphasis. It's so hard. When you get up to the expert level of understanding Scientology, you're going to understand maybe someday how important seniority of orders is to this whole Miscavige era. Because when Hubbard was bumped with that video, because again, what we talked about, the compilation section, I've tried to put all the details of that into the public domain, so it's there for researchers, serious researchers, so they understand the Hubbard mentality when he was ordering people to compile things for him. Dan Kuhn has done a lot of good interviewing, but still there's a few fine points that he and Russ Williams and Steve Cook could be asked to put into the public domain to end all questions, all discussions about how LRH issues were compiled. It's slowly sinking into the Scientologist. You've got to realize that the average Scientologist, you're an outsider, but the average Scientologist, you go on Scientology, you don't know any of this. You don't hear any of this. If you even look in the admin dictionary or the tech dictionary, that's the way we call them, the red dictionary and the green dictionary, there's no mention of the LRH compilations unit. There's no mention of how LRH writings are compiled. But just in the same way that you were holding the level 0 pack the other day,
Yeah.
the one with the lion on the front, I forgot that I didn't hear the word lion correctly, so I should have said, yeah, I should have said, yeah, yes, not no, but it was the pack with the lion on it. That's the key positioning symbol for the grades and the levels is the lion. And then I don't know if you know, but when you go to St. Hill, they have the lions as always outside St. Hill. That's part of their motif. That's an approved LRH symbol to use. And I don't know if you know, but the flag land base, the one in Clearwater, you know what their symbol is? And this is because of Hubbard. It's a big mountain which is in the middle of the ocean. If you look at the symbol that represents flag in Clearwater, it's a mountain in the middle of the ocean. You kind of go like, that looks pretty stupid. It looks like Mount Everest in the middle of the ocean. It's kind of dumb, but that was approved by LRH. So there's all these stupid things that are a part of Scientology. We're like, why is that that's kind of dumb looking? And then the average Scientologist doesn't even know that. They're not even allowed to know that. They're not given these insider details. Just like I was telling you about the iPad the other day, the iPad that was supposed to possibly be the computer device to use instead of using paper routing forms.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever going to know that except for those people who read that. There's so few people who even read those two sentences about the really said, yeah, we used to have this little device in outer space that we used to use, and in other words, like if you were like in one of the big if you can imagine sort of a Star Trekian type of thing where you're reporting back to base. Let's say the Starship Enterprise goes back to wherever planet they're from, and they go into the big space facility where they're all part of the Space Force, and they all, show up to continue their whatever they do, go through their medical checks. They would pick up their iPads, and then walk through the lines with their iPads, which have all their records on. Basically, that's all it was.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
No, it's okay.
So Blue Pencil, that I don't know. That one it ties together with the Class 8 principle that I didn't want to get into, but it's important to know that same principle, because he only mentions policy letters there. But then if you understand seniority of orders, you understand when LRH makes a sort of like high-level principle statement like he does there, that is true from that moment till now. And it'll be true for long range too. Blue penciling should be done, and it is done. Like when the drills binders were put together by RTC, they had to make the drilling steps correspond to the latest LRH technical revisions up to the final minute of LRH's life. And that's just a principle, which makes sense. You always want to have the latest Hubbard. For instance, in 1978 or 79, when you were listening to maybe one of the interviews by whoever it was with Dan Kuhn. Dan Kuhn was Dan Kuhn has such an important history in the movement. But anyways, he was being directed by Hubbard. So Dan and another guy named, what's the other guy's name? Wally? No. Oh my God. I'm starting to lose people's names.
So you want me to read some off the list that you gave me?
Oh, whatever you want. You ask me what you want.
Well, no, I'm to jog your memory.
The blue pencil is such an important principle. I was just saying, what are your top 20 principles to know in Scientology?
Yeah.
This blue pencil principle is it's my number one or number two principle when you're a compiler. When you're compiling, for instance, when you're compiling an LRH issue, you have to make sure that whatever you put into that issue is the latest important changes that LRH is giving you in those final dispatches he gave in those final years of traffic. Sometimes the principle will apply both to the green volumes and the red volumes. Sometimes the principles only went to author services, but they were so important that they extended to the rest of the church movement. An example is what was called the commanding officer inspections. So all Scientology-related organizations always have a commanding officer, the top boss guy. There's a commanding officer RTC, there's a commanding officer CMON, there's a commanding officer for all the classified orgs, one commanding officer for the regional continental units, commanding officer for the middle management, all of the front groups, commanding officer SMI. At the moment when the Watchdog Committee member John Axel was being spat upon, he happened to be walking with the boss of SMI, who was called the commanding officer SMI. And it was actually both of them that got punched and spat upon. And I spoke to the commanding officer SMI just to verify it actually happened, because it so shocked me. It was one of the first things I had to resolve when I got out of Scientology. I had to find out if it really happened, and I did call up and I spoke with Roger Barnes. He was the commanding officer's mind at the same moment that he got spat on and punched by Miscavige at the same time that John Axel was spat on. It just was so troublesome to me. It just seemed like, man, that isn't what I signed up for, man. I didn't sign up to come to the top of the line and be around people that behave like that. It just wasn't right,
Yeah.
Anyway. Okay, so anyways, I forgot what the point was there. Anyways, the Class 8 principles, it's called the silver thread of technical LRH in the Class 8. One of the Class 8 lectures talks about how the same principle that is in that sentence you just read, which is that technical application, and I gave you a sense of just how much technical application drilling is done by the amount of drills binders with the exact procedural quackery step by step by step. This isn't just like loosey-goosey counseling that you get with a normal psychologist. You have to be meticulous in your steps when you're doing the Scientology quackery pseudotherapy. It's extremely regulated, and then the auditor has to make it smooth so it seems natural.
Yeah.
Dan Kuhn was one of those persons that was making what was called the training routines movies, the TR movie. The TR movie is one of the foundational technical movies of the movement. Waldo. So his twin was a guy named Waldo. Waldo is a very famous Scientologist. He was, because Dan Kuhn and Waldo, they're the two key characters in the TR movie. and they were being directed by Hubbard. He basically was the director of that TR movie. It's one of the few tech training films that existed for many, many years. When Dan Kuhn defected out of the movement, then they had to pull the movie because guess what? Guess who else was in the movie? Jerry Armstrong was in that movie too.
No kidding.
There was a shitload of SPs in the movie, and it was just like all these former base staff members had quit and become SPs, including Dan Kuhn. So they had to finally pull the movie and said, "Nah, there's just too many SPs in the movie."
Holy shit!
Trading on it, and the heroes in the movie are guys that quit Scientology. So, anyways, the point is that LRH endorsed Dan. And it was quite a privilege, of course, when you're in a movie where LRH is directing you. It made Dan this all-time behind-the-scenes hero in many people's minds. In my mind, it was sort of like a dream to go work for Dan because he was a hero of the TR movie. Man, he's like, it was so weird. Then when you get to the base, the atmosphere there just sucks. I mean, everybody's being screamed at. It's like it's kind of like. There's this phrase in real life called the honeymoon period. Like when the newbies come around, they sometimes have a honeymoon period until they find out the reality. And it's like, oh man, this place is like a prison, man. You're not going to be happy here, And that's the way it was on the Apollo too. When you talk to the Apollo vets, they go like, oh man, we are so happy to get on land. It was stinky. Did you read the Mike Rinder book yet? Anyways, he tells how horrible life was aboard the Apollo and how he liked when he was sent to shore duty because then you could live in a real room and have, it didn't smell like a person's armpit in a, the smelly clothing hamper. It just was horrible the way that the Apollo was just overcrowded. Anyways, Hubbard, I guess it's really the megalomania debris trail that's going to happen from, and Hubbard was like way more grandiose as a kind of guru idiot compared to other operations, and unfortunately that's what you're listening to, one of the person that tried to take all that crap seriously. So unfortunately that's the way my mind is still unraveling. So if you're interested in getting the weeds, we're basically getting the weeds that
I just sent a interview request to Dan Kuhn.
Yeah.
So we'll see what he says.
Just make sure that you study up all of his prior interviews. And if you can go keep in, just say, hey, Dan, can you give me a breakdown what was in your submission? And I know that you had to do special CSWs. Do you know what a CSW is?
Hold on 1 second. I got to write this part down. Ask Dan Kuhn about CSWs? Mission folder.
On his submission folders on the 1991 edition of the HCOB vols. Approximately how many submission folders did he have to submit for HCOBs on the 1991 HCOB volumes? And understand, remember I told you about Steve Cook's filing cabinets?
Yeah.
In the compilations branch?
Yep.
This is important because what you put on your channel is going to be found by the Free Zone Scientologists.
I'm sure it is.
They've been denied the real history. The more, we call it reality, the more, but it's true, it's just more details about their history they know, then they understand that even the writings that they're studying, which the Free Zone Scientologists, some of them will read the 1991 writings, some of them don't. Like the Dror Center down in Israel, they'll read the volumes that you have. They don't have a problem with it. Other Free Zoners, they'll only read the earlier versions of the red and green volumes. They don't like to read the updated 1991 editions. But then the 1991 editions updated were all improved compilations. And remember that sentence you just read? If you read it again, that applies directly what Dan Kuhn did in his years in compilations. He helped upgrade all this stuff. He helped like fix up a lot of the things. And people always blame Miscavige for that. That sentence you read is Hubbard's fault. The change factor and these accumulating later orders by Hubbard are what caused all of these updatings to be done by the compilation branch. That's the major point. What I just stated is one of the significant over and over sort of like false tiger arguments that the Free Zone criticizes Miscavige for and says, yeah, you're changing Scientology. I kind of, if you're an in-the-know person about the compilations and how the sausage is made, you go like, wait, you get your basic principles of Scientology, and then you realize that these supposed changes are bullshit that people are whining about. They aren't really big changes. You got your basics, and I ran through the basics with you. You're talking about case. You're trying to alleviate the case of a person. If you understand that, when you get up to Class 8, when you get up to Class 8 auditor, you'd understand what I just said. Basically, when you get through the briefing course, you're like really sitting pretty with an overview of Scientology. Get through Class 8, you pretty much got the case understanding. And then Class 9 is the new NED for OTs, which is the new exorcism of OT5 and OT4. And you get OT5 and OT4 exorcism techniques behind you, and then you go, wow, you're pretty much good to go. Then you got to get through your OT7 exorcism techniques, which are a little different from the OT5 techniques. You learn about the OT7 exorcism on OT6. OT6 is basically the practice exorcism tech. You do a little practice exorcism, which is going to be a lot of your extensive OT7 exorcism.
Yeah.
And then the other key reference that we talked about, Legacy of the Tech.
Yeah, I'm working on finding that one.
That is so important. And then at the first part of our phone conversation today, I didn't finish making the point that there's some points that I wanted to bring up to you, which are just so huge. I forgot to bring them up. One of the points was the grade chart, and the second point was the rest of the LRHEDs. We've already covered 339R and 339R-1. All of the final LRHEDs that Hubbard wrote from after 339R to the end of his life are super significant. LRHED 342, LRHED, well, the one that's the Legacy of the Tech, is the one that gives the parallel overview. It's Hubbard saying to all of the followers, guys, this is what I've given you. This is what Scientology is. It's basically the summary of all of Scientology. You get up to the level of understanding of the Legacy of the Tech, LRHED, that's it. That's what Scientology is. And then, so that one is so important, I missed it. That would be the one I should have started with when we talked. I should have said, okay, we're not going anywhere. Let's go to Legacy of the Tech first, and then backtrack. And then you'll understand all the lead up to it. And then you understand that's what Hubbard thought Scientology was when he died, with the exception of him saying, I think I failed, and it's all fucked.
Of course, I look up the term Legacy of the Tech, and the first thing I get is an archive from Chuck Beatty 77 at AOL.com.
That's because I thought it was so fucking important.
Yeah, no, I can tell. I just have to actually find the document. Oh, what's this?
Okay, so here's what I wanted to do. I wanted to send you all of the LRHEDs. I got them. Do you know who Mark Plummer is?
I do know who Mark Plummer is.
Okay, he's the famous internet persona warrior.
Fort Docs, I believe.
Eventually. He is.
I believe he's the one who actually sent me my flag orders.
He's the Steve Cook. He's the Steve Cook of the outside world.
Damn.
He has filing cabinets of stuff which are just so important, but he only has the, what do you call it, the broad public issue stuff that, like, he has basically what you have.
Yeah.
And then he has Sea Org stuff for the continental regions, and he has a lot of esoteric Sea Org stuff, but only from the western United States, which is essentially the continental region. He doesn't have the middle management filings, and he doesn't have the int-based filings, which are two whole upper levels, and then the other two upper levels from that would be the CST. He doesn't have he does not where Shelley is. He doesn't have the Holy Grail stuff, and he also he doesn't the LRH originals. You're gonna hear, you may hear this phrase in your, all of the LRH stuff, the capital LRH stuff, was all gathered together in the early 1980s, and that's what became the first archives under Dan Probilski. Like I said, Dylan knew Dan Probilski, and I believe Dylan might have been at CST when Dan was the original commanding officer of the original CST, where the original LRH originals. But Dan knows Tom Thorne. The LRH originals were being compiled by Jerry Armstrong when Jerry found all those boxes of LRH's private stuff in one of the attics of one of the buildings at the base, and then that's when Jerry said, "Jesus, we should take all this original material and make a new biography of Hubbard." And then he started that whole thing to get the LRH biographer, the original one, who was bought off, to turn his biography over to the church, because it would have been embarrassing to publish it. And there was a whole, that's when Jerry Armstrong blew, and that's why I made the comment that we don't even have a way of properly praising Jerry Armstrong. Somebody like Tony Ortega, who's a professional journalist and is a professional writer, he'll be able to give a proper praise for Jerry Armstrong, but he's just off the charts in terms of good that he's done for exposing Scientology, exposing all this raw material about Hubbard's, lies about his life, pre-Scientology. He has all of, Jerry got to paw through all of those records before he turned it over to the LRH biographer, and he made sure the LRH biographer, the Omar Garrison guy, had copies of it so that Jerry in turn could get it back from Omar. Even after Jerry had blown and become an SP, he still had an agreement with Omar to give him copies of the stuff back, so that Jerry had it, so that when he either was sued by Scientology or he sued Scientology, he had the evidence to prove that he had standing, he had legal standing for suing Scientology or counter suing Scientology. I can't remember what it was, but the copies of the LRH, that had the stuff like the LRH admissions. Have you ever done anything about the LRH admissions? So they've been done a lot. You ever even read them?
No. I mean, there's a shit ton here that I've never heard of before. Oh, wait. Oh, the affirmations. Yeah, I know what these are.
Okay, that's the ones where you realize how crazy Hubbard is.
Yeah, there are no snakes in the bottom of your bed.
Yeah. Okay, we can thank Jerry Armstrong for those.
No kidding.
Those kind of just immediately volcano blow away your faith in Hubbard. You kind of go, wow. Well, Hubbard was a complete loon. Anyways, yeah, I feel like, God, what did I get myself into? Anyways, back to the LRHED. So the final LRHEDs are important to frame how Hubbard thought of Scientology in the end. I know that when after LRH died, everybody was wondering, like, what are we supposed to do? I kind of go like, oh shit, that was my job. My job as a core supervisor was to have enough trained and padded senior executives so they didn't even wonder what they're supposed to do. I mean, if you were reading everything Hubbard had written in the last couple of years, he pretty much he wrote the picture for what you're doing. So it's only the undereducated Scientologists and the completely not in the know outsiders who look at Scientology as some sort of traditional, organization which has a leader and then a new leader comes along and stuff like that. But Hubbard wished for the responsibility of the movement to be spread around to the top councils, and then the top councils were to take responsibility for their sectors. I wrote down one of the key things you need to frame your understanding of Scientology is what is called the Command Channels booklet. It gives you the pie chart of this sharing of responsibility of the top councils.
Already have that booklet.
Okay, that booklet is hard to. The Scientology was supposed to be done per that booklet, and if you don't have leaders in Scientology that will run it per the booklet, then that's why Scientology is kind of this one-man band where Miscavige sort of blames everybody. There's a lack of training, and then there's just so many problems with Scientology. Going all the way back to when you recruit somebody, did you mention something about how the recruiters Scientology are so disingenuous that just lie like crazy about how good everything is? For if you're going to be in Sea Org, you really should. I mean, I was a walk-in to the Sea Org, but I knew what I was getting into. I was willing to go to India, give up all my material possessions, and become a Buddhist monk. So becoming a Sea Org member for me was kind of like Buddhist monk light. You know what I mean? You're allowed to be married, you're allowed to have a spouse, you're allowed to still have sexual relations with somebody. I mean, this is all far easier of a life than being either a nun for the Catholic Church, or for being a priest, or for being a monk, or for being a Buddhist monk or a Buddhist nun. I mean, the lifestyle to be in Sea Org is more moderate than being a nun or a monk. And that's how it should be positioned. It's not a regular middle-class life by any stretch. There's no unit of, now, you only act like middle-class Westerner in Scientology Sea Org staff life, just so you don't repel the public, but you truly ought to be understood as more like a Catholic nun or monk. That's really the role that you are when you're a staffer. You're religious. The IRS tax category is religious worker. You are sub-poverty. The whole sort of like discussed with staff and Sea Org life just shouldn't even be put into that framework of being substandard to regular middle-class life, because if you're joining staff, you should be taking the view of, well, listen, did you want to go over and be a monk in a monastery, in a Buddhist monastery, either as a nun or a monk? Well, pretty much that's what you're doing when you're becoming a staff member. And now Hubbard tried to jazz it up. As you can see, the business of org. I mean, my God, if you're just the other way to best frame Scientology is to just read the final green volume. Well, unfortunately, we don't have. If you look at the index for the green volumes, you just read all of the last policies written from 1982 until Elleridge's death, and then do the same for all the LRHEDs from there till the Elleridge's death. Same for the red volumes, all the bulletins from 82 to the Elleridge's death. Within those policies, like I say, you read along, and then you'll get a skill of just sort of selecting out these sort of like nuggets of him. He just sort of like throws out these zingers, which sort of tie in the whole thing. Well, if you go through all of his final years, the zinger sort of like tie it all together statements, then you get the picture of how LRH left the movement for people to carry forward. And I can tell you that you don't get the feeling or flavor of how LRH left the movement at all from this whole Miscavige era, which is basically sort of like the events, all the glitzy events presentation of Scientology. Um, Anyways, and then if you're studying a subject like Scientology, and you wish the subject to be sort of like orthodox or true to whatever it is that's being said, you kind of have to understand the PR final years atmosphere that Hubbard wrote for it. Even though behind the scenes he's slapping people around saying, "Go spit on Joe for me," you know,
Yeah.
he would never say that to the public. And there used to be people, like I told you, the Gang of Five, that would never, in a heartbeat, ever let that leak out. They don't want that stuff to leak out. They don't want it to leak out that even Miscavige was beating up people, and they would have thought, "Listen, you're not supposed to do that, man. Just stop doing that. You know, that's not right." And then Miscavige would say, "Well, what about this one? What about the you know, if somebody's being a traitor, I'm gonna." And Ellery says, you know, the other staff would never let a pin-sticking staff member who's sabotaging and sticking pins in other staff. That guy who's sticking pins in other people, he deserves a black eye. So that's why there was that even one incident, which is detailed on Marty Raspin's blog when Marty was still a good critic, where he talked about where intentionally people were ordered to, by Miscavige, to go give so-and-so person a black eye per that policy letter, where Ellery said to do that. So, I mean, unfortunately, see, Miscavige was, as you've already picked up, taking all these figurative Hubbard irate stuff, which had not priorly been allowed to leak through, except for, it is true, and it was allowed. Did you hear about the men who was pushing the P? The P, there was a gruesome penalty.
Someone was pushing a peanut across the deck with his nose.
Yes, and Hubbard was there smiling and laughing, and the daughter of the man who was getting a bloody nose was crying. I mean, Hubbard was extremely vicious, malicious. So all of the horrible things that John Atack says about Hubbard are absolutely true. I mean, he is an evil guy. So, I mean, it's really sad that you listen to somebody like me, and then I'm still of that mindset but it's true. The only people that were trying to make anything good out of Scientology were people that brought their own innate decency into Scientology and just couldn't believe that all this evil viciousness is just all through it. And in which the older, wiser critics of Scientology who've been there, done that on the Apollo, they go like, man, it's all shit. One of the things that John Atack said when he interviewed Kerry Gleason, it's another name that I didn't bring up to you because I don't. We're getting off the main stuff. But Kerry Gleason was the commanding officer for the unit called, which was the execution organization just underneath the Commodore staff aides. There was a Commodore staff aides for L. Ron Hubbard. They were directly beholden to Hubbard. Key orders went to them. And then there was Kerry Gleason, was the commanding officer of what was called the flag bureaus, the management, meat and potatoes guys who contacted down the regional units of Scientology down to the orgs. They were the ones that managed the orgs, wrote the evaluations, used to fire the missions definition being the two-man team that would go down into these orgs and do heavy hussar stuff below the stops off the lines, get production going, that kind of stuff. So that was the theme of how Scientology managed its orgs. They'd always send these two-man teams down there to basically remove the top leaders of the class org, get somebody else new on, to shake things up, basically the shake-up teams that would go down and command production and blow the stops off the lines, because that's the way Hubbard's management works. It basically, it always assumed that there were, like you correctly noticed, the Hubbard system always blames the staffs, always blames the followers for any mistakes. It never blames Hubbard. So it's just a top-down blame the subordinates for not making the quackery successful. It's a pitiful, horrible situation for that reason. Okay, so editorialized, but that's, you already know all that.
Yeah.
Okay, so Kerry Gleason was the commanding officer. Kerry Gleason got actually more uh, when he was asked what did he think about it all. He said two words: "It's shit." I think he might have said, "It's all shit." Yet Kerry was given more detailed orders from Hubbard than possibly any other management boss in the whole history of the movement's history. And I got a chance to read all that management orders from Hubbard. And I knew Kerry. Kerry was a big boss above me. I was no friend to his or anything like that, but I knew him. And Kerry, guess what? Kerry he was a class 12, and he was an OEC FTBC. So he was probably the last manager who did achieve all of the requirements. Remember, I told you about staff status 7 and 8? Guess who was the last staff status 7 or 8 in the movement's history?
Karen.
Kerry Gleason.
Oh.
And he was busted in 1982. So that's a condemnation of Miscavige's era. Miscavige has not produced another Kerry Gleason.
Wow.
And then, like I said, now whose responsibility did that fall on? Hubbard, because you're struggling simply to get a grip on all these intricacies of Scientology.
Yeah.
But you see how difficult and how many years it would take to rise up to become a Kerry Gleason. He was a Karen de la Care, plus what Karen didn't do. Karen never did the OEC, FEBC, and the public relations training. But Kerry did it all. Kerry was one of the last ones. There's only a handful of people. I didn't want to get into those weeds, but that's what you need. If you're going to run Scientology properly, you have to have people that can be the cardinals. And then from the cardinals, you choose your pope. So Miscavige, he's never become a class 12. He doesn't even possess the humane enough characteristics, like I was trying to tell you. But Debbie Cook, remember, Debbie Cook.
Mm-hmm.
You could see what type of a woman she was and type of a empathetic person. And then the phrase I was trying to say the other day for what we call these type of people, they're called natural auditors. They're people that could be auditors, and they need no training at all. They basically are good people you can sit down with. Jesse Prince was one. Glenn Samuels was one. There's just humane people. In fact, Karen de la Care is a very natural auditor person. And Debbie Cook was even on top. In some respects, Debbie Cook was probably better than Karen de la Care, but because of the time factor, you just don't have enough time to train on everything. Debbie never became a class 12, but Debbie did at least do the OEC, FEBC, and PR training, so she was at least trained on all of the things. So she was close to becoming a Kerry Gleason, but she didn't get all the way to class 12. So anyways, Scientology needed these class 12s. And then to become a class 12, you also have to know the latest and greatest about every single technical procedure, like I explained in the classroom where they do the drilling with the drill simulators with all the binders, which detail every single quackery technical sub-procedure, and there's literally thousands of these sub-procedures. And that's why I was blown away when you pull out your subject volume 3, that just has all the procedures up to clear. Doesn't go through all the exorcism upper levels, nor does it go through the L rundowns procedures that Karen de la Care, and there's other procedures at the Flag Land Base, in Clearwater. There are quackery procedures there. I mentioned a couple of people, Ron Norton, Leakey, Halters, and then even Debbie Cook are of the quality of what's called a case cracker. If you became a case cracker auditor, in some respects, you're almost superior on cracking cases than even a person, in some respects, than Karen de la Care,
Mm-hmm.
because you know how to smoothly patch up somebody who's been fucked up by the quackery. But Karen was also, if you've listened to Karen's interviews, she was extremely good at fixing people that were screwed up by the Scientology quackery. It's a very difficult task because it's quackery. So if somebody has some true mental illness, Scientology is not going to work. It's just not going to work. It's going to make things worse. It's a placebo at best, is the pseudotherapy. Okay, so let's get back to what you asked me about. What I wrote down, the thing that I missed telling you in our first interview is the final years of LRHEDs, and I can send you to them all. I can send you all of them.
I was going to say, all of them would be fantastic.
Yes, and then just read the last ones from 1982 onwards, and then when you get to the Legacy of the Tech one, you'll go, oh, that's what he's talking about. That's the final LRH view of everything. Let me just send those to you. That would be the big thing that I missed telling you, and that should have been the thing I probably should have started with. Whenever I try to educate somebody like of your level of interest, we should have started with the Legacy of the Tech and then worked backwards.
We can do that next time.
Okay, we'll do that.
So, all right. Do you need my email
I'll send you the LRHDs right now.
Do you need my email?
Let me write it down. I was just going to send it as a message.
Oh, all right. Yeah. All right. Cool. I don't know if you can send attachments as like PDFs or whatever you have as a message, unless it's a picture. All right. Let me just for the hell of it.
Why don't you email me at chuck877@aol.com, and then I'll know who you are.
Alright. I did yesterday when we started the meeting, but you said that AOL was taking a long time to update.
Oh, that's because I was on my phone. But on my phone, I can't see it.
Right.
Oh, I see. So I just didn't look at my emails today. A lot of times I'm so out of loop. I'm not like a mainline person anymore.
It's all good.
I used to be a mainline person. But now I've been superseded since about 2006.
So, alright. So did you need me to resend it, or do you already have one?
Yeah, what happens when you get old, and I'm getting old, is you let too much spam come through.
Yeah.
Just, you're not sharp enough. You don't go like, this is bullshit. I don't want this. And then you don't take the time to unsubscribe to all of this crap that you get sent. I mean, you might be interested slightly, and you want to read one or two articles from somebody. Oh, I was supposed to call somebody. You remember I told you about the famous movie, the TR movie?
Yeah.
The one person before Dan Kuhn, who was actually better than Dan Kuhn, was a man who was a former Catholic priest who became an auditor in Scientology, and Hubbard called him. He had natural TRs. In other words, he brought his natural TRs into the movement. His name's Chuck Murray. He's so famous that we'll have to talk about him sometime.
Absolutely.
I was supposed to call him. Anyways, I'm going to mention that you're going into the history. I just asked these really old-time greats, I say, what do you think about it all? And then guys like Gary Gleason say, it's shit. It's crazy. It's like, okay, I don't know. I can't. Well, what is your, give me what's your email?
Yeah, all right.
If I can.
I'll type it in the text message.
Wave gallery? No.
Nope.
Oh, here we go.
That's a 0, not a letter O.
Okay, good. Okay, I got it. So I'll send you the LRATDs.
Cool.
I guess and then the thing that I missed telling you would be the Square Zero Legacy of the Tech. That's really the one. That gives the Hubbard hindsight view of all of Scientology, and it's sort of a heartfelt, emotional writing to all the followers of the unit of the movement, in the same sense as the one that we did the other day where it says, shush, let me tell you the secret. What?
Yeah.
Tell us, Ron. We're just about dying to know.
A universe core.
Huh?
I know. I noticed in today when I re-looked at the document, it mentioned the universe core.
That's right.
So
That is. Yeah.
I gotta.
That's why people were in Scientology. They wanted to get the goodies,
Yeah. Hey, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I gotta get ready for bed. I go to work early in the morning.
Yes. Okay. Okay, I'll send it to you.
All right. Thank you so much for talking again, Chuck.
Oh no, we'll talk anytime.
Awesome. It's awesome to have you as a person to get information from.
Yes, and I've been at this for 19 years. There hasn't been anybody like you yet. You are so fast. When I told you Hubbard would have called you a fast student, well, and you're not even a student, and we can talk freely. You know what I mean? We can break all the rules. So.
Yeah, we're doing all the verbal tech.
Exactly. All right, bye-bye.
All right, have a good night.